Hey everybody, I am here with Kate, otherwise known as the Snacking Nanny on Instagram. Kate has been a nanny for over 5 years and had worked with our agency, You Nanny, in Milwaukee, which I'm also from Milwaukee, if our listeners don't realize that. And I'm going to talk to Kate today a little bit about traveling with families. So, Kate, why don't you just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been nannying and sort of what your nanny career looks like?
Yeah, so I have been a full-time nanny for about 7 years now, since 2017. I took a small hiatus for about 10 months, went to part-time as I was a youth case manager for about just under a year. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to full-time nannying. This is definitely where I need to be, and where I want to be, and where I feel like I just thrive the most. And I've worked with quite a few different families over the years, been like a school year nanny, summer nanny. And then most recent, the last 2 years, I've been with a family, and I've been with her since she was about like 10 weeks, and she just turned two. So that's been really fun. Some people always ask like what your favorite age is to work with, and I don't really know if I have an age. I feel like I'm always like, oh, that's such a good age. There's perks to every single age. I love the toddler years though. Babies are like obviously sweet and adorable, and we love that. But once they get to talking, once you can like do more activities with them, that is just like so much fun for me, for sure.
I agree. I feel like I love the 2-year-old age too. And I know some people are like, oh, the terrible twos or the, whatever they say about the threes, but it's always like, oh no. I'm like, oh my gosh, those are like when they ask their little tiny voices and then they ask a billion questions. So sweet. And they're curious and fun, but there's like that, fine line of wanting their independence versus like they're not ready for that yet. So it makes it a little tricky, but I love that.
Yep, figuring out the world, and it's so cool to like see things from their point of view too. Sometimes like as an adult you kind of like forget, and then it's like, oh, it's kind of fun to like see them figuring out the world and stuff. Yeah, that's great.
Definitely, definitely. So, because we're going to be talking about travel today, I want to ask you some questions. So, how many times have you traveled with a family, and how many different families have you traveled with?
I have traveled with three different families. One family I've traveled out of state with. My current family that I'm with, I traveled out of state with them. And then the other two families was just like weekend trips and like one overnight trip for like a couple hours away within the state. And that was back when I kind of first started nannying. So I wasn't as well versed in kind of like what to look out for. So I think that it's really important to now, I'm more versed in it, and I'm more familiar with like what to know and what to ask. So this topic is actually a fun topic for me to talk about, because I feel like everyone should kind of be aware of what the ins and outs of traveling with your nanny family looks like. And
Definitely. So, when a family asks you to travel with them, what are some key points? Let's just say your top three, like sort of boundary settings, or what you would say back to the family, like, okay, sure, yes, I'll absolutely do that, but I have one, two, and three questions to ask you before we move forward with traveling.
mhm. I think making sure that a meeting is established prior to going, and then once we're in that meeting, discussing like what the duties are going to be like while I'm there. It might look different than the duties that I do right now in the day to day, depending on, is it going to be in a hotel? Is it going to be in an Airbnb? Are we going to be with family? Like it just depends on like who's also going to be there. Are there going to be other kids around? Am I going to be in charge of any other children while we're there? Hours of times that I'm going to be getting paid for. Is it going to be the typical 8 hours? Am I going to be responsible for them at night as well. I think those three things are just really important. It's just like knowing what my roles are, who I'm going to be fully in charge of, and then like the hours and then payment within that time frame too. That's also really important.
Okay. So tell us when a family, and I think the common mistake that families have is when they come to their nanny and they're like, oh my gosh, we're going on vacation. It's going to be great. And you're going to come with us and we're going to pay you your normal week salary. And I know for me, owning the agency, that it's like, no, 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 no. First of all, you're there at night, right? So do you typically see families charging, or you charging, nanny charging a nighttime fee in addition to your, let's say, 8 hours? And then on top of that, what does it look like in the evening time with kiddos being in your room or not in your room?
hmm Yeah, so I think, yeah, a lot of I've seen on like job boards and things like that where families are like, well, we're going on vacation. It's fun. It's like, wait, let's like reel it back a little bit because it's not our vacation. It's your vacation and we're there to work. And I think think it's forgotten on how we really appreciate our time when we get off. No matter how much you love your job, like I love my job. I love being there, but coming home and like being able to unwind is an unmatched feeling. And you don't get that necessarily when you're on vacation with your nanny family. Even if you have like your own space, it could just be different to like unwind and what that looks like. So I think that making sure that you are getting an overnight fee, charging that, and making sure like if you are going to be responsible for the child, what does it look like if they wake up? When does your hourly rate kick in if they're up for X amount of time? Or are you going to increase your overnight fee because it's a guarantee that they're going to wake up because they are a little baby, or however that's going to look like? And then making sure that they just know, like, or like what your off time can look like too. Can you leave? Are you going to be on the rental if there's a rental car? Are you expected to kind of like be on call if something happens? They decide last minute they want to go out to dinner tonight outside of your 8 hours, what that's going to look like. Throwing out like every single possibility that could happen, because the more prepared you are, the better the whole trip is going to go, and just there's not going to be any questions.
Definitely. So, out of a question on the if the kiddos are in your room or not, and then also to your point, sometimes there's a kiddo who is, let's say you have a 5 and 7 year old in your room, and you're like, that's great, they sleep all night, no worries. But I have placed Annie several times with families that travel, and it's a newborn, and so it's like, okay, well, it's kind of like being a night nanny, or doing that nighttime care, sleep, not necessarily sleep training, but I mean, while you're with that baby, you're waking up and doing the feedings at night. What do you see in terms of market rate for that nighttime care? And I suppose it's two sort of different things. If it's a newborn, let's say, versus older kiddos, what would you typically charge for a nighttime rate while traveling?
Um, for like an overnight, I would say for like one child, starting at like 100. I've seen 75. That would probably be like for older for like one child, and then kind of increase from there up to over 200. And then I think like if it's like a newborn and if there's like a guarantee that, because in a way for me, in the way that I kind of see like an overnight fee is not even necessarily for the work that I may do, it's because I'm away from my house and I have, a pet and someone is coming to take care of that pet while I'm gone. Or, if someone's coming to get like mail or something, it is an away fee because I'm not at home. So in that way, it's a perk in that way, not necessarily because I might be doing work. So if I am going to be doing work, then I would want to discuss like, okay, for each feeding, it's taking this much time. Is it going to be a flat rate, or is my hourly rate going to be, am I getting paid an extra 3 hours every night because, so 8 hours plus the three, is that going to be overtime? Is it going to be regular? Um, and I think that depending on that type of situation, I think that it's going to be case by case, but that definitely needs to be decided beforehand, especially like newborns too. Like you talk about it like a month before you go. In a month, things are going to be looking a little bit differently. So making sure like you're staying on top of it, and like if you might be sleep training during that time, and during that time of the trip it might look different. So just making sure that everyone's on the same page the whole time, and things are constantly changing with kids. Sometimes they're really great sleepers and sometimes they aren't. So talking about the possibility that their child may not sleep through the night is good to just put on the table.
Yep, definitely. So I guess it's kind of safe to say, okay, well, I'm going to charge X amount per night, let's just say $100 a night. And then if you have kiddos in your room, depending on what their ages are and responsibilities, that's going to be tacking on an extra X amount too, because it's like you're working. It is a really good point too that, because I work with a lot of families and they will say, oh, well, we're going to Mexico. And so, this is a vacation for our nanny too. And it's like, well, first of all, no, it's not. But second of all, if you view it that way, let's talk about your time that you have free, right? So if let's say you're going to Mexico and the family is like, all right, well, Kate, we want to have you work in the morning from 8 until maybe 4 in the afternoon, but you have every night off. How would you, as a nanny, deal with that? If you had your own room and they're like, nope, 4 p.m. until the next morning, 8 a.m., you're free to do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that that would be, I mean, still not a vacation for me, because I'm still in the work mode. However, during that time, I'm definitely going to be wanting to unwind. I think that also you have to remember that those kids are going to be out of their normal realm, and their schedules might be different. We could be dealing with some really emotional kids. Naps might be wonky. Those 8 hours that we're going to be working might be very difficult. Yeah, we're in Mexico. It's warm. We're on the beach. We're hanging out, but at the same time it's like we're still taking care of these kids, and these kids might be totally dysregulated the whole entire time, because we're not in the right time zone. We are not sleeping in our own beds. We are might be sleeping in a pack and play. There's just so many different things. And so while that is, I mean, that's how it was when I traveled. Like last year with my nanny family, I had certain times and I had a couple nights off, and then other nights I had some mornings off, and we shifted in that way. And I really took advantage of that time off. I like really spent filling up my own cup, like just reading, walking to the beach, and just like relaxing, because when I was on, I was on. I'm in a new place. I don't know, you're watching your surroundings more. You're kind of just you're always on. Whereas like when you're at their house and they're in their own environment, you're not that you're not on, but like you are in a comfortable place where you spend your most time. So it's like it's a different dynamic completely.
Well, yeah, and definitely, and kids too, I mean, thrive off a routine, right? So it's like when you're traveling, you're going somewhere, not only are they pumped up about the plane and where you're going and the exciting things, but then also everything's new. And yeah, you're right, nap schedules are off and things are getting crazy and all of that stuff. Yeah, so that totally makes sense. Um, what are to sort of I have these two topics that are like sort of taboo that I want to ask you about. So I like to throw in a little spice in these interviews. So if you're traveling with a family, and I suppose it depends on what your family is like and how close you are to families. How do you feel about drinking with families? Because I know a lot of times you're like, oh, we're in Mexico, we're on vacation. They're like, oh my gosh, just come over and hang out in our room and share wine with us. Or, because I've seen, I've got some stories of different ways that has gone before. So, as asking you as a professional nanny, how do you feel about that topic?
I think it depends on the family that you work for. I think that there is a time and a place for that. Speaking on like my experience, I'm trying to think back. I had maybe there's maybe 2 nights, maybe three, that I had one drink at dinner when I was off the clock with them. Um, and I think that that's appropriate. And we had a conversation prior to going, like, hey, just let you know, like, this can be a gray area. We know that, but we also know that, like, you are responsible and you are not gonna, go overboard. You can drink when we're there. I'm not gonna worry about it. Um, and I, for one, in my personal life, I'm not someone who would even drink more than one drink at dinner, anyways. And so I just one drink and like that was it. And I didn't feel uncomfortable. If it was one of those things where it's like I'm not really comfortable, there's no way that I would have done that. I think also if I was like working, later or something like that, like I probably wouldn't, or like really early or something, I would not. Um, but I can absolutely see that there are different situations where it's not appropriate. Um, but in my case, like past families that I've worked for, I probably would have been like, no, I wouldn't have. Um, but with the family that I work for currently, our relationship is very professional, but also we are just laid back people in general, and which works really well for us and our dynamic. So I did not see a problem with that. I wasn't taking shots. And if you do that, like that's awesome too. Like whatever, it's just not my style. But yeah, nah, I think you should always try to remain as professional as possible, especially when you're in a different place. But if you feel safe and welcome and, in that way, fine. But yeah.
Well, sometimes too, you also have to be aware. And I was a nanny for a while before I started the company, but you have to be aware too of there's a fine line with the relationship, right? Because you're sometimes the parents are the ones drinking, and then you're the responsible one, and then you're like, all right, like all right, kids, let's get going, let's get to bed. So figuring out what that balance is, and I think that's why it's so important too. It sounds like the family you work for, you guys just are a really good fit. But that's why finding a family that's a really good fit is so important, because it's like then you mesh well together, there's an understanding, you have clear boundaries and all of that. So that's awesome. Um, okay, so tell me one more taboo topic, and then I want to get into sort of the top three things that you would want to bring traveling, packing wise. But another taboo topic that, and I guess it's not super taboo, but I always wonder this, and I've always wondered it even when I was a nanny. So when you're traveling with the family, tell me swimsuit attire appropriate.
Okay. So this is an interesting question that you would ask me. I feel like I'm gonna have a different answer. Because I wear a one piece always. So from my perspective, I just always wear one pieces. I'm very a conservative dresser in that way. So I don't know if I'm like the right fit for that question. However, I am always like I want to feel comfortable around everyone that I am, especially like people who I'm working for, they're paying me. I want to just be like a representation of them. Um, and so I just always err on the side of caution of just dressing conservatively in to an extent of like, I'm obviously going to be showing my shoulders and stuff, you know what I mean? But like, um, if you wear like a two piece, that's fine. I would never be like, you shouldn't do that. No, I mean, the mom that you work for is probably wearing one, whatever, you know. But I just wear one pieces always because that's just how I go swimming. But it is, I think, like, yeah, I agree. I think like anything that you might lose going down a water slide should not be worn especially when you're like with children. If you're going to go down a water slide and you're going to lose a bottom or you're going to have to like super readjust, probably shouldn't wear that on like a family vacation. Especially when you're like with kids. You're not just like lounging usually when you're with kids, you're like moving around and stuff. So I like to be like comfortable and wearing things that I don't have to constantly be like pulling down or pulling up. But yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, that's kind of how I am with just regular attire too. I want to be comfortable and I don't want to have to be adjusting myself constantly when you're working with kids. So
Yeah, I totally agree. It runs the gamut, right? And so I'll probably put like a poll or something when I post this on a reel. But I would be curious to know because honestly, I think you're the first person I've ever really asked that question to. But I've always thought it because I'm thinking, if you're a younger girl, mid 20s or late 20s or whatever it is, and you're going on a family vacation and there's kids, and it just, in my personal opinion, and I wear two pieces in my normal life, but I would never being a nanny. Like I'd be one piece all the way, like just keeping it safe and conservative, like you said. It just feels like that's more appropriate, but maybe we'll do a little questionnaire about that.
yeah, I could definitely see that being a spicy topic for sure. I could see that being that way.
I'm sure I'll get yelled at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question for you, Kate. So tell us top three travel items that you would bring with you packing for a family vacation as the nanny.
My personal items that I would need to bring, top three, would be a book or my Kindle, my like reusable water bottle, and probably just like a comfort item, like a sweatshirt or a blanket if I can pack it, something that would just um, help me like unwind at the end of the day, like throwing on a sweatshirt or hanging out with a blanket while I'm reading or something like that. Yeah, I think those would be like my top three, making sure.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been great, Kate. I appreciate all this information. It was so good getting to know you, anyways. I feel like, on social media, I follow so many different people and watch what you post. And if anybody wants to follow Kate at the Snacking Nanny, you should do that because she makes ton. And maybe I'll interview you again about snacks because you make all kinds of fresh baby food and snacks and just all kinds of things. So it's very informative. But thank you so much, and we will definitely be in touch. And if you need anything, let us know.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
Bye.